And welcome to this week's Mailbox, where we discuss some of the more interesting comments that have appeared on the channel in the last week. Cheekily called it the State of the Warcraft address today, as it sort of coincides with roughly the time of the year where the US President does the State of the Union address, or not, as the case may be. But that's just because what a lot of comments are about. I did a video chosen by a poll yesterday on what I see as the five biggest problems, or biggest mistakes that Blizzard make that have caused problems in World of Warcraft. So quite a lot of comments have come from that, as well as a few other things as well. So first of all, where's the mailbox? So this is something we do each week, where you have to sort of say where the mailbox is, which particular place and in which zone. So last week's, of course, was on Azumist Isle, Stillpine Hold. There we go. Well done to those people. So this week's, we've gone from an Alliance-y place to a Horde place. Nice winter landscape there. So you just have to say which specific location this is in and which zone it may be found in as well. So on to the first one. So the first question or statement or something. It says, what are you going on about? The new forum has been made to prevent... Don't use apostrophes for plurals. Been made to prevent discussion. It's made it easier to have back and forth and track it with threading that is pretty well implemented. Better formatting, auto-quoting of highlighted text and the information provided beneath the original post that allows you to see who is talking and how much. I found myself confounded by what you were saying. So what I was saying was that actually it discourages back and forth talking. So what am I talking about there? Well, so if I just have a look at the MMO Champion website, I've got a particular post here. So what you can see down here is you can clearly see people discussing things with other people. You know, and down here you've got someone replying to two other different people in there. Someone else can come across this, have a little look at what's been said. It's very easy to follow the discussion. Now, if I have a look at the Blizzard website, okay, now, although I can reply to a particular person's post, what I would just say is if I'm looking down here, okay, you can quote something, but you don't ever see anyone quoting multiple people. Majority of these posts are clearly responses to something that is not the original post, and yet you don't really see what it is a response to. So it's not natural for people to do that. And if I'm just looking down here, all I'm seeing is largely, occasionally you've got some quote in there, but you know, this is just because it happened to have a blue post. It's one of the good ones. But nonetheless, the majority of them are talking about things, and I have no idea what they're talking about, because it doesn't relate to the original comment, and I cannot see any discussions forming at all. I can occasionally see someone posting a bit of a quote to someone and they want to put the thing in there, but there's no discussions taking place. None at all. Because it doesn't encourage it. But you used to see it. In the old forums, you could see people, you know, quoting multiple people, just like in the MMO Champion one or the Wowhead forums or anything else. But here I don't. I just see individuals replying either to the original post or one other person's post. I don't see back and forths. Do you know what I mean? There's no real back and forths that you see on other forums. And that's what a discussion is. A discussion isn't a reply to one person. You'd see things developing. I almost saw one there. That was almost one. Look, someone's replied to that. So that's someone. This is someone replying to someone replying to someone. That's almost a discussion going there. But you don't really see anything other than that. It's just, you know. And that's what I'm trying to sort of get at. You might think that, oh, because you've got the ability to reply to someone and they've got the ability to see that you've replied to them, that you could have some sort of discussion. But what I would say to this is, so where are they? You get little outbreaks of them, but they're very isolated. Whereas if you click on a forum post on MMO Champion or Wowhead, you see discussions. Those discussions can go over several pages and involve half a dozen or more people, all basically like having a round table discussion. And I don't see it on these new forums, but I did see it on the old forums. And that's, you know, and that's why people say, it's not just me as well, that it is discouraging proper discussions, you know. And as I say, this is one of the better ones because I basically picked on one that had a blue response, because that is the best one you are ever going to see, because people are more inclined to post on them then. So, that's my answer to that one. Whether you agree or disagree is another matter, of course. Okay, on to the next one. So it says, who directs the team? I would assume the game director. Yes, so would I. Couple that with a lack of vision from said director, and you have the issues WoW has. Ian isn't a bad guy, but he lacks the natural, even the trained by experience, ability to have a vision with a medium that requires a genuinely creative person at the helm. I am unclear as to when his input to the game became the driving voice behind the scenes, but I can imagine with what Blizzard said is in their development cycle that BFA was the first truly Ian iteration of the game. It shows, and it will continue to show with him leading. The thing is, right, so in terms of him not being creative, I think he is. You've got to remember, before he became assistant game director, and then of course game director, he was a very well-respected encounter designer, so that takes a fair amount of creativity. So I don't think that's the issue. I think it is more in terms of being able to coordinate a team. It's a classic case. His elevation was a classic case. And you see this everywhere. You see it in every workplace. A person is good at their job. A promotion comes up for a more senior position. And, the people who are good at their job are the ones in pole position to get those positions. But the position they go up to isn't necessarily more of the same, just in a more senior role. It is sometimes a completely different job requiring completely different skills and attributes. So basing your decision of who should get the promotion on the fact, they did this other completely job really well, is a bit mad. But it is what happens. It's what happens in loads of industries, if not all industries. I'm not saying all employers within that industry, but I think probably to some extent all industries, at least some businesses within them do this. And that's clearly what's happened there. But also, just to say, and you would be right, Battle for Azeroth will be the first entirely Ian Hazacostas project. Legion, part and part. But don't try and imagine that his predecessor was amazing and Ian is the one who's really not up to the job. His predecessor was not up to the job as well. People cheered when he got shoved off somewhere else, because it's. He had a massive disdain for the community. At least Ian Hazacostas is, he doesn't trust the community, and that's why he's reduced the amount of direct communication between developers and the player base. But he's not out and out rude to the player base in the same way that Galgan was, Chilton. So, it's not like he replaced someone who was good at it and he's not up to the job. I don't think he is up to the job, I have to say, in terms of coordinating those teams, because his job is now very different to that of although he'll still call himself a games developer, he sort of is, but he also sort of isn't. His job ultimately is to coordinate those teams, and he doesn't, and he's not providing that leadership. And I don't think it's because he's lazy, and I don't think it's because it's not intelligent enough. That's clearly not the case. I just think he's not capable. And, and it is the case that he's not. I don't know what he's trying to do. Does he recognise this? Does he not recognise there's a problem? If you don't recognise the problem, obviously you can't deal with it. On to another one. Oh, hello, sorry, wrong one. I'm going to use that in a moment. Oh, I remember, it's this one. Here we go. So we're talking about Transmog. It says, the Transmog restrictions I completely understand and get. It's all in the class fantasy mindset. You wouldn't see a priest in any other game running around in plate armour. Wouldn't we? Because that's funny, because I see it in every other game that I play. So, and this is what this image was for. So this is, my priest in Star Wars The Old Republic. And that's the outfit I use. That's not play. That's very light armour, as they wear, light armour. But I have no restrictions in Star Wars The Old Republic in terms of what I make that costume look like. Now, I don't have a lot of costumes in Star Wars The Old Republic, I have to say. There are bigger, beefier plate sets, but, I could put it in that. There's no problem at all. I don't have any of the big, proper, full-on armour sets, but I'd have no problem putting that on if I did. Get rid of those. A rather more stark example. So this is mine in Elder Scrolls Online. And, that's him in his winter get-up, because the last time I played it was sort of Christmassy, so I put him in his winter set. But the more normal set, which I've now transferred him to, is this. This is my caster healer in what is clearly plate. You know, and this is the thing, you do see it in other games. I couldn't unfortunately show you Lord of the Rings Online. The launcher isn't working for whatever reason today, but you can do exactly the same thing. In fact, Lord of the Rings Online has the least restrictive wardrobing of any game that I have played. But even in World of Warcraft itself, it doesn't fit these tropes. Garrosh, warrior, big full plate. Oh no, wait, he's basically naked. That's not a big deal, right? And I know, okay, so you're going to be saying, oh yeah, but you don't see priests in plate. Actually, that's weird. Yeah, actually. I have already said you can see priests in plate because you've got Dark Iron Dwarfs. If you have a Dark Iron Dwarf priest and they put on their heritage armour, actually you do have a priest in plate. And in fact, you know, that was the example even Ian Hazacostas get when he's, you know, contradicts himself. But do we really see? Yeah, it's a bit funny. Where in World of Warcraft would we ever see a priest in plate? Let me think. Hang on. I sort of had it there. No, I can't quite think of that. Anyway. But yeah, it's an absolute nonsense. It's contradicted within World of Warcraft. It's contradicted by Ian Hazacostas. And it is in every other game. You can basically customise your characters these days in modern games as much as you like. And in some games, you've been able to do that for some time. It is a complete nonsense. It doesn't make sense from an objective point of view. It doesn't even make sense from a subjective. World of Warcraft just say, look, this is our game. We don't care what other games do. This is what we do. They even contradict that. There is no argument. So I'm going to have to refute that statement, I'm afraid, very strongly. Next one, it says, I still wish they kept Pala for Alliance and Shaman for Horde like in vanilla to this day. It felt unique and the game is missing that, which is why I hope they bring things like Dark Ranger class for Horde or only or something. No. Although you may feel it feels unique, it would create the equal problem to racials. Whichever one was best for doing raids, Paladin or Shaman, and we all know which it would be, the guilds would have played that. It would have just shifted the balance to Alliance instead of Horde, that's all. You'd still have this overwhelming number of players playing one faction. Particularly in terms of the end game stuff. It would make the problem just far worse. And it's not fair as well. It's inherently unfair in an MMO, which is supposed to be about the social element. I know a lot of MMOs are now set up so you can just be a loner in it, and a lot of people want to do that. Okay, fair enough. But what it's supposed to ultimately be about is that social interaction. And by having these things in the game, you are saying to a person, you cannot play with your friends. That's what you're saying. When I first started playing World of Warcraft, you know, before it had come out, I'd played Warcraft 1, 2 and 3, big fans of it. I was still playing Warcraft 3 at the time. Didn't want to play World of Warcraft just because of the type of game. I just thought to myself, an MMO, lots of other people. I know what people are like on the internet. I don't want to do that. A friend of mine who was a flatmate at the time, he was saying, oh, you should get this. You'll like this. And I went, okay. I trusted his recommendation. I said, can you play a paladin? Because not only did I know paladins were a thing, of course, in Warcraft, but I always like to play paladins in any fancy role-playing game where I've got the option. And he said, yes, you can. So I said, I got it. I'll get it. Now, if that friend, he was playing a dwarf hunter, and he was playing with some friends as well. If that friend of mine had been playing Horde, then the response would have been, yes, you can play a paladin, but then we wouldn't be able to play together. In which case, I wouldn't have bought it. I would never have played the game. You know, because ultimately, you know, if I'm going to be playing a game where I know I'm at the mercy of like the internet, I at least want to play with my friend who's getting me into it. And if I can't even play my class of choice, that would have just seemed baffling to me at the time, and still would today. So no, although it does make it feel unique. But then again, if I walk down to the shops and someone throws a spear into my chest, that would be a fairly unique experience. But it's not a good experience. It's not one I would look forward to. And the same thing here. You know, factions in themselves have the risk. They run the risk, and they do in many cases, basically say, you cannot play with your friends. All right. Or you have to play in a way you don't want to play. But if you actually have the class, ultimately, when their character is the most important thing in any role-playing game. Character, most important thing. To not be allowed to play the class you want and with the friends you want is beyond the pale. And it never should have existed. And I know why it existed. Because at the time, before they started blurring the lines between certain storylines, of course, Shaman were things you would associate with the Horde races, and of course Paladins were things you associated with the Alliance races, and that's why they did it. But it was not a good decision, and it was inevitable that if they carried the game on, that they were going to change that. Next one. So again, so when I talked about the 5 biggest mistakes Blizzard made with regard to World of Warcraft, someone saying, releasing this expansion in such a bad state must be somewhere there. Well, no, it's not. And the reason is, releasing the expansion in a poor state is not a mistake. That's a consequence of mistakes. You know, the fact that they allowed it to release in that state, although it's technically a decision, they could have said this needs another 6 months, so we're going to... I don't think... Well, they couldn't do that because they committed themselves too early, but they didn't have to commit themselves. That was another decision. But ultimately, the time they had to do this expansion was enough. It's the same time they've had to do... You know, it wasn't any less than they've had with other expansions. In fact, the early expansions tended to release... The first few expansions tend to release within 22 months. Like an expansion came out, the next one came out 22 months later. This one had a full 2 years. Now, I'm not going to say it's more than any other. Legion had the most out of any. That had several years to a certain extent. But BFA had enough time. They wasted their time, basically. It not only had enough time, but with the largest team World of Warcraft has had since the very early day. Obviously, technically, I suppose it had a larger team when it first launched because they got everyone in Blizzard working on it. They took them off other games. But that wasn't really being in the WoW team. That was just being seconded for a short time. So in terms of the actual permanent size of the team, it's the largest it's been. And they've had a good 24 months, which is more than many other expansions. So it's not an issue that they didn't have enough time. It's an issue that they didn't know what they were doing. And they kept changing their minds and changing their minds instead of having it sorted and going and saying, right, this is the plan, this is what we're doing. And that causes such a mess, an absolute mess. Anyone who works in any job where you have long-term projects to work on, if people keep changing the goalposts, keep changing the parameters basically of what they want you to achieve throughout that process, you will never get anything achieved. So that was the thing. So yeah, releasing it in a poor state wasn't a mistake. Obviously they shouldn't have done it. It was that's what I argue. It's a consequence of the actual mistakes I discussed. Next one. So it says, I notice a very similar lack of coordination in my own company. So I was talking about the fact that different teams in World of Warcraft that should be working very closely together clearly are not. We also know that people within the same team don't even work closely together when they should. So I notice a very similar lack of coordination in my own company and all of the others that I have worked at. Some are worse, some are better, but in general, people who are put in leadership positions seem to lack at least some ability to perform their job. Because frankly, leadership isn't easy, and I don't see companies teaching the skills needed. I've noticed the same sort of thing as well. I wouldn't say that everywhere I've worked is poor for this, but I have worked in places where it has been poor. And again, it goes back to what I said before. You don't get yourself into a management position by being a good manager. You get yourself put into a management position by, well, first of all, there can be a bit of cronyism in there. There can be a bit of people who are doing the appointments not really understanding stuff either. But ultimately, it's by being good at the job you were doing, which didn't require any management skills. Maybe time management, but management of other people's skills. Because you have to start somewhere, you start at the bottom. And so obviously, you know. But yes, it is a very good point about the fact that these skills are not taught. And skills are not natural. Some people naturally learn skills more quickly. But a skill, ultimately, is something that you learn. And if you can learn it, you can teach it. And so these people should. I remember the place I work now, under a previous regime several years ago now, they got all the middle managers, as they call them, although I would call them junior managers because it was the first level of management. They got all of them to do this like leadership course. But it was so pathetic because I was talking to some of the people who were doing it and they just had to write this fruitless, the little exercises that were completely useless. They didn't learn anything. They weren't even really taught anything. It was just a paper exercise to tick. Oh, they've got this qualification in leadership and management now. And they said it was absolutely pathetic. They just used to write an essay each week on some rubbish. And there you go. So, you know, it's what you want is proper teaching of leadership skills. And yes, that would help a lot. That would help a lot. I also, again, my experience of working in certain companies, sometimes I worry about, because I've seen different ways in which people are promoted into leadership roles. Some players, and I think this is probably places, sorry, and I think this is probably quite common. When they have a vacancy, they just advertise it. Okay, we want expressions of interest. I've even seen guilds do that in World of Warcraft. That's a bad way to do it. Because the problem is, all you'll then get are the people who want that position. I mistrust greatly people who want to have leadership positions. Because what is it they see in them? Is it the responsibility and the opportunity to take a team forward? Or is it the personal power they're after? It attracts an awful lot of people who have feelings of self-importance and want that power, or just the extra money, or any number of things that are not going to encourage them to do a good job. They just see it as the goal itself. This position is a goal, not an extra responsibility. They just see it as reward. Should we put it that way? I distrust that. Whereas you get some other places where, and I know you have to still advertise it, you've got to give everyone the opportunity. But in guilds, for example, you don't have to be an equal opportunities employer in a guild. And the guilds who are going to get the better officers are the ones who are going to approach the people who've already demonstrated such skills. But in a workplace, again, you'd encourage some people to go for it, I would say, in a way that people that might not ordinarily think about it. So actually, just the nature, even if you did teach them leadership skills, the nature of quite a lot, in my experience, of people who go for these positions, they're not the ones who really care. It's just for themselves. It's not for anyone else. But there you go. But I certainly, I don't see leadership in the WoW development team. It's not there. Otherwise, they wouldn't keep changing track all the time. They wouldn't keep... And the way they engage with the player base as well, if they were comfortable in what they were doing, they wouldn't be shunning us as much as they are too. And this has been going on for a while. We're not blaming this on one person. Well, I'm not anyway. This is a weird one. It says, the bug reporting for BFA beta was annoying. It says, every quest had a yes-no box. Why? I'll go to the rest of it, but then I will actually answer it. It says, can beta testers not just fill in bug reports if something is wrong? If the quest is working, there should be no need to tick a yes box. Most of the videos I watched showed people were completely ignoring this anyway. I did tick the boxes, but it just slowed things down slightly and seemed largely irrelevant. Okay, here's the thing. It was actually a really good feature. I never played the beta of the original version, of course, because I wasn't even going to play it when it came out. And I didn't play in the beta of TBC. But I did Wrath of the Lich King, and it was in Wrath of the Lich King. Then I quit the game. So I didn't play the beta of Cataclysm. I don't know whether it was in there or not. But it seemed to disappear. It hadn't been there for the past few expansion alpha and betas. And then it came back, and it was actually a really good thing. Yes, beta testers could just fill in a bug report. But here's the problem. You say that you've answered your own question, really. You say most of the videos you watch showed people were completely ignoring it. If people will ignore a little box that's right in their face, are those same people likely to open up bug reports and fill it in studiously when they encounter them? No, they're not. Here is the thing. You say about slowing the game down as well. It's not a game. It's testing. We're not playing a game when we do alpha and beta. We are testing it. We cannot, on the one hand, complain that there's bugs in the game that were known about months ago and there's things wrong with the game if we never provided the feedback while we were supposed to be testing. We're not... the flow of the game is totally irrelevant when you're testing. You're supposed to be filling these things in. You're not supposed to ignore it. It is there. Basically, let's split people into three groups. Let's say you've got people who will write detailed feedback or pertinent feedback, not waffle. No one wants to read that. Whenever they notice something that they feel needs reporting. And they'll do that whether you get that box flashing up or not. On the other end of the scale, you've got the people you've just talked about, the ones who will ignore it no matter what happens. They're seeing it as a preview of the game and they're treating it like that and they're not doing any testing. Then you've got the people in the middle. They're not minded to pull out bug reports every time they see something. They'll just think, oh, someone else will do it. But if it's there and they've got to click on something anyway, they'll go, I might as well just at least say there was an issue here. Even if they don't say anything, just saying that there's an issue there with that quest, at least Blizzard, they can see that there's a lot of people reporting that there's an issue, and some of those people will have written a comment, and that is at least useful. So it gives them more useful feedback than if they didn't put it there. And maybe, if only a handful of people are going to fill out the bug reports and no one else is going to say that there was anything wrong with it at all, they don't really know if the people filling out those bug reports are just making an issue of nothing, or if it was really an issue. Or is it an intermittent issue? Is it something that affects some people and not others? Or is it something that affects everyone? They don't really know that. So that's why that box was there. That's why it's a good thing. And it is because the vast majority of people who are supposedly testing in the alpha and beta are not actually testing at all. They're just doing a preview of the game, which is disappointing because, like I say, I feel vindicated in complaining if things aren't right when it launches because I have reported things. But if I haven't, I would feel I wouldn't feel entitled to complain if I haven't actually told them it's a problem in the first place. So that's the reason for that. Hopefully that explains it. So it says, I feel they need to hire more devs or just delay launch until it's done. I can't imagine they're going to make more money pushing out unfinished products that earn them a bad reputation and lose them customers than they would by having the staff required to get them done on time and shipping a quality product that people want to spend money on. I would agree. Now, if we take that last point first about they're going to make more money pushing out, then, you can't imagine they're going to make more money pushing out unfinished products that earn them a bad reputation and lose them customers. No. The thing is, there's a sort of arrogance at work here. And again, you see this in other industries as well. I've seen this in mine. And there will no company, like in terms of the management, the people who make these decisions, thinks to themselves, oh yeah, it's going to get us a bad reputation and lose us customers, but we'll do it anyway. They don't think that. They think that players might chunter a bit, but will ultimately still play it because it's such a great game. So they believe that they are going to make more money by pushing it out. In fact, they've seen that although this doesn't really apply to World of Warcraft because it's a completely different beast, they see it happening with so many other game studios and other games. The idea is you deliberately push the game out as early as possible. As soon as it is considered playable, you push it out, get the advanced orders coming in as soon as possible, get it out. And then when the complaints come in, you just promise you're going to make fixes, and then you fix it over a period of time. In the meantime, they've already bought the game, and with any luck, they'll buy your loot boxes as well. Of course, World of Warcraft doesn't have the loot boxes the way it mostly generates its extra money. There are a couple of other ways, but the way it mostly generates its extra income is with the subscription. So it makes far less sense for Blizzard to do this with World of Warcraft. Yes, you would argue that. But they believe it's going to be all right. You've got to remember, they are committing to a release date long before it's anything close to ready. So they're just too optimistic about what they can get done. When in last January, a year ago, just over a year ago in fact, when they said it would be out by the 21st of September at the latest, they didn't think to themselves, we know this game's going to be unfinished by then. They didn't think that. They thought it would be finished. When a few months later, and it was just a few months later, they announced the actual release date, again committing themselves 4 months ahead of time when it used to be expansions ago 2 months ahead. Again, they might have at that point thought, oh, this is a bit sticky, but they still probably thought they were going to be able to do it. And what they were desperately trying to avoid, and there was another thing at play here, and I don't know this for a fact, but I can imagine this. I mean, some people say this was the case in Wrath of the Lich King. I don't know. But I can certainly say it was the case from Cataclysm onwards. You always had this huge content drought at the end. A full year when you didn't have new content. It varied a little bit, but basically a year with no new content. Blizzard made certain promises with Legion, many of which they delivered on in terms of content. And one of them was that there wouldn't be another content drought again. If they'd have delayed it, although it's easy for us to say they should have delayed it because it wasn't ready, if they had, that would have meant that there would be a year at the end of Legion, a full year again with that content drought. And this Legion was them saying, judge us now, it's over, we're not doing this ever again, there is not going to be any more content droughts at the end. I mean, obviously, you've got about 6 months. You've got to have something. You know, otherwise some people won't be able to finish the content. But, you know, it wasn't a year without content, without new content. So it was all right from that point of view. If they'd have delayed it, it would have been. It would have been. And they were so desperate not to do it. I'm sure they were desperate not to do that. So realistically, they were stuck. What I would say now, though, well, actually going back to the other things, says I feel they need to hire more devs. Well, they're not going to. They've been told there's got to be budget cuts, in fact. And I've already talked about this many times. That doesn't look good for the next expansion. But, I mean, yeah, so the other thing I was going to say is, if you look at, because this is common behaviour now in the gaming market, it's common behaviour to deliberately push a game out when it's no better than it's playable. You would argue it's playable, but it's not really finished. And then they'll want to get the money in ASAP because they'll have spent a fortune, especially for AAA titles. They've spent a lot of money on developing it. It takes years to develop it. They want to recoup that cost as early as possible. They don't want to wait an extra year to do so. They want it ASAP. So that means they have to announce at least a rough release date to be able to do those advance orders, and then so they get it out. But in the last year, no one can have failed to notice that it's gone a bit sour. In fact, this year, for the first time ever, these game studios are going to make less profits than previous years. Because it's hit them hard. This, you know, the gaming community have sort of felt they've pushed it too far, and they've bitten back. Now, it's possible that the chastening experience of BFA might cause a similar sort of thinking at Blizzard or Activision Blizzard, because I do now think Activision may be, or the non-Blizzard part of Activision Blizzard may be interfering now. I don't believe that's been the case before, but I think they may now. And it may cause them to pause for thought and think, well, hang on a minute, this is still a game that makes a lot of money. If we have another bad launch with the next expansion, we could just lose, you know, almost everything. We could just kill it off. So maybe, just maybe, they'll have a rethink of their business strategy with it and decide that actually making sure that it's got the right resources. I mean, I would say making sure it's got the right staff will help as well, but at least the right resources may help that. We'll have to just wait and see on that. Next one, Transmog. Oh, another Transmog one. Says, yeah, personally, I think Transmog itself was a big mistake with a lot of ramifications that Blizzard didn't foresee. Art on new items gets less and less important, and it's hard to argue that armor sets from previous expansions don't look better designed than current. Personally, I would like to see some kind of player housing where one of the features, instead of a transmog system, is the ability to display armor sets on your walls or on statues and everything. I mean, with player housing, of course, there's all sorts of things you can do. But in terms of the transmog, I don't think it was a mistake. I can understand your point about making it... I mean, I certainly use older sets. I do think they look better, but not everyone does. And also, the newer sets are high res, and some people just for that reason think they make it look better. But I would also argue, well, that's up to the art designers to make the new armor look better. Just make it look better and people will want to use it. That being said, I still don't think it's a mistake even if that's the case, because as soon as Transmog came into the game, what did a lot of people start to do? Rerun old content, old dungeons, old raids, wherever you could get the stuff that they wanted. That gives the game a certain amount of replayability without Blizzard having to put any serious effort in at all. So in actual fact, I don't think it was a mistake at all. I think it's because you do get people doing transmog runs that wouldn't, and think about what they would be doing if they didn't do that. It's not like they're doing transmog runs over other types of content. They're doing transmog runs when they wouldn't ordinarily be doing anything in the game. So I think it can only be a good thing, regardless of how much people may be using new sets. And some people will be using new sets. So no, but I would, again, further to what I said before, argue that if they loosened the restrictions on what transmog you could wear as well, it would just expand that, because then some people would go off chasing sets that they currently can't wear, so there's no point in chasing them. But if they could, well, then that again means that they'd go back and try and find that gear for transmog too. But no, I really don't see it as a mistake. The ability to customize your character in a cosmetic way is a fundamental part of any role-playing game. And when you restrict it, you are putting off players. Not all players, but you are putting off players every time you restrict it. And if you artificially restrict it, you really are putting them off. Oh, and the last one. Okay, so a little bit of a... So yes, so I'll read the comment first of all. It says, you mentioned that the only people who know the Lich King still around were perhaps Tyrion and then Darion and the Death Knights. Actually, every mage player who pursued the artifact weapon for the Fire Specking Legion was sent to Icecrown Citadel and had a personal chat with the Lich King, who eventually gives them fellow Malorn and tells them to leave. Also, any Horde players in BFA who participated in the Vol'jin questlines would have found out that Bane and Rokan and Talanji all know the Lich King is still around. And Vol'jin knows, if a ghost knows anything. And someone else did say that when Sylvanas chucked herself off, she was aware as well. But I don't remember that in the book. I might need to reread the book. So I'd completely forgotten about all of that, I have to say. I had forgotten. And I had done, although I didn't do a mage in Legion, I did do one in the alpha and the beta. So I should have still known that as well, and I completely forgot. So, yes, I've got to completely change my position now. It's very likely everyone knows. No one is behaving as if they know. But quite frankly, I agree now. Yes, if the mages know, you know, if those gnome-riddled blabbermouths know about it, I'm quite sure everyone knows about it. And yes, before you say, I know Death Knights technically have gnomes too, but they very sensibly keep them locked up in the Acra so they don't get to go off blabbing to all and sundry. Unfortunately, no mages are, for whatever reason, allowed to roam in public. So yes, it's odd that no one is reacting to this, because if everyone else knows, how the hell do the leaders of the Alliance not know? I don't really believe that. So again, it might be another issue where at some point I decide to pick at their storytelling again. But yes, thank you very much. I have to concede that assumption is very wrong, and it looks like basically everyone knows. Everyone must know that the Lich King is still a thing, and that it's, you know, Bolvar Fordragon who is the new Lich King. That'll be interesting when they eventually have to bring him back to more public knowledge. I'll try and look. I wonder if Anduin, when we see a cinematic where he finds out, has to put on feigned surprise, a bit like when you get a Christmas present that's a load of rubbish and you have to pretend you really like it. Maybe he just, oh, I had no idea. Oh, wow, Bolvar, you're the Lich King. I had no idea. It was kept such a secret. While he pats the gnome mage on the head. But anyway, there we go. So that's the mailbox for this week. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to click the like button, subscribe for further content. Comment down below, in particular, if you know where the mailbox is this week. And until next time, I'll see you later.